The idea of parallel dimensions has been a theme ongoing in literature, religion, and philosophy for thousands of years. From Plato's theory of forms, to religious ideas of external dimensions called heaven and hell, all the way to the modern theory of the multiverse, men have been fascinated by the idea that there are realms outside our perception. And since recorded history began, there have been innumerable theories, speeches, talks, discussions, all to do with this idea that there is something beyond our own world, a place we can neither see, touch, smell, or hear, yet exist nonetheless. Such ideas made their way into the work of H.P. Lovecraft, most prominently in his body of work known as the Dream Cycle, a collection of short stories and novellas that include The Dreams in the Witch House, The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, The Strange High House in the Mist, and The Case of Charles Dexter Ward. Within his work, Lovecraft created a place called the Dreamlands, a place that exists in parallel to our own but can only be accessed by dreaming. And of course, if you're watching this video, you know that in Bloodborne, the world created by Hidetaka Miyazaki and his team has been heavily influenced by Lovecraft's work. And this influence can be seen most prominently in the inclusion of the Great Ones, which are the gods in Lovecraft's universe, and the idea of dreams and nightmares, parallel dimensions that form the setting of Bloodborne's world. And it's the nature and structure of those dimensions that I want to discuss today. Now, when the game was first released, there was very little evidence to say, one way or the other, what the world of Bloodborne was actually like. We knew there were dreams, different dimensions, and there was a waking world, but we didn't know much else, and it was quite easy for players to assume that the Great Ones were extraterrestrials that came from somewhere in our universe. And there was evidence to support this point of view. Take for example this item, which you're given to by a strange creature in the Forbidden Woods. It's called the Tonsil Stone, and is described as a latticed deformed rock, or perhaps a meteorite. Since this item has a direct connection to the Great Ones, it's quite easy to assume that this is evidence that the Great Ones are from outer space. Now there's more evidence to support the Great Ones from outer space theory. After you defeat Gehrman, the first hunter, you can buy an item from the Bath Messengers using his old hunter's badge. The item is the Burial Blade, his own weapon, and its description states, "Its blade is forged with siderite, said to have fallen from the heavens." Again, you can use the same line of reasoning to assume that this means that the Great Ones are from outer space, because Gehrman has a very close relationship with the Great Ones. The Blades of Mercy, Eileen's weapons, also mention siderite. The weapon's blades are forged with siderite, a rare mineral of the heavens. It's almost the exact same text again. So based on this, you can't blame most players for assuming that the Great Ones were from outer space, just like in most of Lovecraft's work. But things get a bit interesting when you dig a bit deeper. There are two pieces of lore I want to talk about. The first is a lore note you find in the Healing Church workshop, which reads, "The sky and the cosmos are one." Then there's Eileen's crow feather garb, which you get after she dies. And this states, "Hunters of hunters dress as crows to suggest sky burial." And they hope that former compatriots might be returned to the skies and find rest in a hunter's dream. Now both these pieces of lore equate two things with each other. The lore note equates the sky with the cosmos, and the garb equates the skies with the hunter's dream. And so the Healing Church, much like the player, can come to an obvious conclusion. As it's stated in the Cosmic Eye Watcher badge, the choir stumbled upon an epiphany, very suddenly and quite by accident. Here we stand, feet planted in the earth, but might the cosmos be very near to us, only just above our heads? The cosmos, and by extension the Great Ones, don't exist out in the far reaches of the universe. They exist very close to us, in their own domains or dimensions that are not parallel to our world, but rather above it, literally stacked, one on top of another. The best way to describe it is like an apartment building or a hotel, where each floor represents a level of the dream or the waking world, and in order to access each level you have to travel through certain portals that act as staircases or elevators between each floor. So let's see if we can figure out how these different dimensions are related to each other, i.e. how they're stacked. So the first thing I'm going to do is assume that the waking world, which makes up the city of Yharnam, the Forbidden Wood, Bergenworth, Canehurst, Hemwick, is level 0, ground 0. Now, if you look at the tombstones in the Hunter's Dream that you use to access different parts of the game, you'll notice that they all say one thing: awaken above ground. Now, to me, that's an obvious clue that the Hunter's Dream is actually beneath everywhere else, beneath even the waking world. That kind of makes sense, and it completely changes my view of the dream. In a lot of religions, you find that hell is found beneath the earth, and it's as if the Hunter's Dream is supposed to allude to hell in some strange, ironic way. And it's also the only part of the Dreamlands that you find beneath the waking world, which makes it unique, but I can't figure out why that is. Now let's go back to the tonsil stone. It's suggested that it fell from a higher place because it's described as a meteorite, so we assume that it came from somewhere above the waking world. Now, when you use the tonsil stone, it transports you to the Nightmare Frontier, where you actually find the amygdala boss. Not only that, but the stone actually looks like a baby amygdala's head, and so I think we can be pretty sure that the stone fell from somewhere in the nightmare, and for that reason we can place the Nightmare Frontier above the waking world. Now, I've been playing Bloodborne for over a year, so I'm a bit embarrassed to admit this, but there's one obvious environmental clue that I missed within the Nightmare Frontier. If you travel across the main bridge, which is about halfway through the area, if you look up, you'll see a building in the distance. Now, that's clearly Murgo's Loft, and that clearly puts the Nightmare of Mensis above the Nightmare Frontier. And interestingly enough, if you actually travel to Murgo's Loft in the Nightmare of Mensis, you can actually see the roof of the amygdala chamber from the loft itself. Now let's go to the Hunter's Nightmare. If you travel through the tunnel right after the first cathedral, you'll find the remains of an amygdala. Now that suggests that the Hunter's Nightmare is beneath the Nightmare Frontier, but I don't think it's directly beneath it. If you carry on through the Hunter's Nightmare, eventually you'll get to a spot where something literally falls out of the sky. Now that is clearly the corpse of one of the slug creatures you find in the fishing hamlet. So that tells us that the Hunter's Nightmare is also beneath the fishing hamlet. But what is the order exactly? How does the fishing hamlet relate to the Nightmare Frontier? First of all, you access the fishing hamlet through the astral clock tower, which you find in the Hunter's Nightmare. Now, once you actually get to the fishing hamlet, you'll find that there's water on both sides of the little walkway, and if you look closely, you'll notice that there's buildings under the water. Now, are those buildings in Yharnam? I don't think so. That is actually the Hunter's Nightmare, and the fact that the slug lady, which only exists in the fishing hamlet, fell down into the Hunter's Nightmare, as I showed previously, proves that the fishing hamlet is directly above the Hunter's Nightmare. Okay, we have a pretty good picture of what things look like now. There's only one piece left in the puzzle, and that's how the fishing hamlet relates to the Nightmare Frontier. Now this is a good one. If you go to the beginning of the Nightmare Frontier and look out over the distance, you'll see what looks like ship masts poking out through the clouds. Now, at first, I don't think anyone had any idea what that meant. There were lots of theories, but I don't think anyone realised what it is. But of course, now with the DLC, if we go back to the fishing hamlet, we'll see that there's boats everywhere. And for me, it's obvious that those boats are the ones poking out above the clouds in the Nightmare Frontier. So it's obvious that the Nightmare Frontier is right above the fishing hamlet. Now we can put everything together, and you can see my interpretation of what the world of Bloodborne actually looks like. At the bottom you've got the Hunter's Dream, which includes the Chalice Dungeons. Then above that you've got the Waking World. Above the Waking World you've got the Hunter's Nightmare and the Fishing Hamlet. And above that you've got the Nightmare Frontier and the Nightmare of Mensis right at the top. The only question left then is why? Why is the world in the order that it is? But I think I'll leave that for another time. In the meantime, if you guys have any theories on why the world is the way it is, just leave a comment and we'll have a discussion by it. Before I go, I'd just like to say thanks to the Souls community. I don't think lore hunting is done by any one person. Obviously there are people who do amazing jobs out there, like Ian B and Redgrave and others, but I think that lore hunting and understanding the game really is a community project, and I really appreciate all the work and theories done by other people that are definitely contributed to my own thoughts. So I just want to say thanks for that. And of course, this is just a theory, so if anyone disagrees or has anything to say about it, just leave a comment and we'll get a discussion going. It'll be really cool to see what you guys think, and I always appreciate feedback. Okay, cheers guys, bye.